Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, tensions in the Middle East continue to go up. More on how the Biden administration is responding. And the U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to consider a federal ban on bump stocks. More on what that means just ahead.
And some good news for warm weather fans. Some 70s on the way by next week. Those details coming up as Mountain News at 5:30 starts now.
Dedicated to Southern and Eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. We begin with a sad update in Martin County. The latest news conference at the site of that coal plant collapse happened about an hour ago. You saw it live here on WYMT. The judge executive announced then that both workers are dead after they were trapped inside of that building when it collapsed. The incident occurred Tuesday evening, almost exactly 3 days ago. The men were reportedly working inside the building to prepare the plant for demolition. We have a reporter in Martin County and hope to have much more on this sad turn of events coming up tonight at 6. Now to another developing story we're following. We understand 2 forest fires have combined in Harlan County, and it's about 40 acres. Crews from the Division of Forestry in Bell and Harlan counties are at the scene. Crews from the Sunshine Fire Department were called in first around midnight for a fire and then called back to the scene this morning. This is all happening off Kentucky 987 in the Smith community. We have a reporter heading there, and we hope to have more on this later tonight.
Well, we are tracking some beautiful weather across the mountains into your Friday evening. Here's a live look from the WYMT studio, and you can see plenty of blue sky, also sunshine across the region, and that temperature also warmer today. Once again, back in the middle 60s for most of us right now. 66 over in Manchester, 63 for Harlan, also Clintwood, 62 for London, and 64 over in Somerset, also Pikeville. So once again, we are close to average on your Friday, but some even warmer weather is on the way, all thanks to an area of high pressure close to the eastern coast, and those winds will continue to flow out of the south and bring in some more milder weather into this weekend, also into early next week. But into this evening, if you have plans for high school football as those playoff games kick off, be sure to grab the jacket just to be safe. Those temperatures are chilly once the sun sets. We do stay dry under a mainly clear sky, and again, those temperatures back in the upper 40s, upper 30s as you wake up in the morning, but some 70s are possible by early next week. Those details coming up in just a few minutes. Steve?
All right, Cameron, thanks. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken delivered a message from President Biden to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. America stands ready to help Israel as it fights to protect itself. But Blinken also delivered a request that appeared to fall on deaf ears. CBS's Erica Brown now reports from Washington.
Israeli ground forces say they have surrounded Gaza City as their aerial bombardment of the Hamas-controlled territory continues. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, "We will not relent until we achieve our goals, destroying Hamas, returning our hostages, and returning the security to our citizens and children." Netanyahu's vow to keep fighting came after he met with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who asked for a pause to allow aid into Gaza and civilians to escape.
We provided Israel advice that only the best of friends can offer on how to minimize civilian deaths.
President Biden has said the U.S. is working hard to find a way to get Americans safely out of Gaza. He reiterated that call Friday morning.
President Biden, your message to Americans trying to get out of Gaza right now. What's the capture?
The U.S. is also working to try to prevent others from joining the fight against Israel.
We need to continue to prevent escalation of this conflict. It's spread to other areas.
Israel says civilians in the north of the country were injured in a rocket attack from Lebanon. It responded by targeting Hezbollah infrastructure. Hezbollah's leaders threatened further attacks and criticized the U.S. for backing Israel. Friday, the Pentagon released photos showing the USS Eisenhower and USS Ford strike groups taking position in the eastern Mediterranean near Israel. Erica Brown, CBS News, the White House.
Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin deployed the strike groups with order to deter hostile attacks against Israel and try to prevent a widening of the war between Israel and Hamas. A statement from the Committee to Protect Journalists released yesterday said at least 36 journalists have been killed during the Israel-Gaza conflict. The death toll includes 31 Palestinians, 4 Israelis, and 1 Lebanese native. The journalism advocacy group says the Israel-Gaza conflict since October 7th has been the deadliest period for journalists since it began tracking in 1992. The United States is sending a $425 million assistance package to Ukraine. It comes as the Biden administration struggles to get more funding to assist Ukraine through Congress. The new package contains $125 million under the Presidential Drawdown Authority, which is pulled directly from Defense Department stocks. It will supply Ukraine with weapons that have proven invaluable to Ukrainian forces and does not include any new capabilities. President Biden paid a visit to Lewiston, Maine a short time ago. The President and First Lady Jill Biden made the visit following that mass shooting that killed 18 people last week. The President spoke about the tragedy, saying the shooting reopened a lot of wounds from shootings that occurred in the past.
You know, as we mourn today in Maine, this tragedy opens a painful wounds all across the country. Too many Americans have lost loved ones or survived the trauma of gun violence. I know because Jill and I have met with them in Buffalo and Uvalde and Monterey Park and Sandy Hook and all. I've done, anyway, too many to count.
The Supreme Court has agreed to consider a federal ban on bump stocks. Bump stocks are devices that allow semi-automatic rifles to be discharged more rapidly, meaning a shooter can potentially fire hundreds of bullets a minute. Federal appeals courts have been split on whether a federal bump stock ban is legal. At issue is whether bump stocks should be classified as machine guns under the National Firearms Act. Today, the Supreme Court also agreed to hear an appeal from the National Rifle Association. The NRA claims the former head of New York's Department of Financial Services tried to persuade banks and insurance companies to sever ties with the group. The complaint claims Superintendent Maria Vullo violated the organization's First Amendment rights by threatening adverse regulatory action to organizations that did business with the NRA. Former President Donald Trump's son, Eric, continued his testimony today in the New York Attorney General's ongoing civil fraud case against the Trumps. During the testimony, Trump said he stands by financial statements he signed on behalf of his father in 2020 and 2021. Eric, his brother, Don Jr., and the former president are accused of falsely inflating the value of some of their properties by hundreds of millions of dollars. They have denied any wrongdoing. A judge has sentenced a former Donald Trump appointee to 70 months in prison for his role in the January 6th riot. Fedo Klein worked for the State Department. Judge Trevor McFadden ruled he assaulted multiple police officers on January 6th. McFadden slammed Klein, saying, quote, "Your actions on January 6th were shocking and egregious." Prosecutors noted Klein is an ex-Marine and may have been trying to keep his job as a political appointee by keeping Trump in office. Passengers aboard an Alaska Airlines flight where an off-duty pilot attempted to cut off the engines have filed a lawsuit against the airline and its operator. The suit was filed by 3 passengers who claim Alaska Airlines and its operator, Horizon Airlines, did not properly evaluate off-duty pilot Joseph Emerson before he was seated in the jump seat of the cockpit. The Biden administration has announced new funding to boost port infrastructure. $653 million will go toward 41 improvement projects. They include improving a dock in Coal Bay, Alaska, adding railroad, roadway, dock, and utilities in Long Beach, California, and reconstructing a berth at Port Newark. These efforts come in response to a supply chain crisis sparked by the coronavirus pandemic. A foundation has been created in Matthew Perry's name to help those struggling with addiction. The foundation launched Friday, less than a week after the actor's death from an apparent drowning. In a statement, the Matthew Perry Foundation said it wants to honor the actor's legacy by making a difference in as many lives as possible. Perry, who played the character Chandler Bing on Friends, had been open about his lifelong efforts to recover from drug and alcohol addiction. Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, tens of thousands of fans lined the streets of Arlington, Texas to cheer on the World Series champions.
Plus, we are tracking cool and calm conditions as we end the work week. Your forecast coming up after this break.